Welcome YouTube to another D&D Fridays. Today we'll be taking a look at just the mechanics around death saving throws and maybe some alternative ways that death could be encountered within the world of D&D, and we'll go over a couple of those different cases. But before we do that, let's not forget, hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, and comment on down below on what ways you think you find enjoyable for death saving throws or death in general. Without further ado, let's get into it. That is, unless you have a life cleric.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the whole aspect of death and death saving throws, death is typically comes about whenever you drop to 0 HP through traps, combat, whatever it may be. And whenever you come to 0 HP, you fall down to the ground prone no matter where you are. Just hopefully you're not 60 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And then you start making what is known as death saving throws. Basically, these are just a straight d20, and depending on what you roll, it could be either a success or a failure. So most character sheets you should see a couple of different small bubbles, like you're taking a Scantron test, and those take care of your death saving throws. So to have a success, you must roll at least a 10 on that d20, and then that's one success. Anything under a 10, that's a failure. You need 3 successes to get back up, roll to regain 1 HP. Gonna still be prone until you stand up, but at least you're good to go. If you have 3 failures, you're just outright dead. Keep in mind, whether you succeed or fail, they don't need to be consecutive as long as you get 3 of a kind. Now, if you happen to roll a 20, a natural 20 on that, you no matter what the rest of the rolls are, you regain 1 HP. If you roll a 1, then that counts as 2 failed death saving throws. So be very careful. Now, there are some stuff that can really help out. Ordinarily it's just a straight d20, but features like the Paladin's Oath of the Paladin's Aura of Protection can impact your death saving throws by adding their charisma mod to it. So definitely be wary of a few class features and spells and stuff like that can potentially help you out when you're down.
Well, that you would hope the paladin or the cleric's near you anyway, so you can take advantage of their aura when if they can't heal you.
Yeah. And when it comes to healing, if any sort of healing will get you back up, no problem. And whenever you become stable or regain HP, any and all death saving throws go away and are resetted. So that's good to know if you're in a pretty tough situation and you're bouncing up and down like a ping pong ball. Now, the interesting thing about death is just because you drop to 0 doesn't mean that you just die. If you happen to go to minus your max hit points, that's when you die outright. So that makes a lot of the things like reduction of your HP maximum and stuff like that really dangerous. As if your HP max is 2, then you only need 4 points of damage to outright die.
Yeah.
Whereas if your HP maximum is 50 and you have full health, you need 100 points of damage in 1 attack to outright kill you.
Which is a lot harder to do than 4 hit points. So
Now, if your HP max is 50 and you're at 4 HP, then you only need 54 points of damage in 1 attack to outright kill you. So definitely keep that in mind. It's whatever damage to take you to 0, and then add it on to whatever damage takes you to your max HP in 1 attack. Um, so That's definitely a lot of good stuff to remember. I know I've seen a lot of folks definitely sometimes look at it as a D20 plus your con mod. That's not how rules is written, but at the same time, if that's something that your GM allows, then by all means do that.
Absolutely. One of the spins that that I've played with is when you get a natural 20, you get two death saves filled. You know, get two successes on there instead of just getting one HP. Right. So there's still a little bit of tension there, and you won't pop immediately back up. But so there's room. You know, it's not rules as written as you mentioned, right? But there's a little wiggle room to make it unique for your game.
Yeah, exactly. And if somebody is down making death saves, and let's say like the cleric in your party or whoever has healing magic is out of spell slots or whatever, anybody could walk up to that down player and make a medicine check, DC 10, to stabilize that dying creature, which can be very useful depending on the situation.
Yeah.
And basically, what stabilize mean is you're still at 0 HP, but you don't have to make any sort of death saves at all. And if you don't regain any sort of HP at all, then you automatically regain 1 HP within 1d4 hours. But you're still considered unconscious for
Right.
that time.
The essentially, you know, you can think of the medicine check as somebody stitching up your wounds, and you're no longer actually bleeding out. So your body's able to, you know, your character's body's able to recuperate.
Exactly. Kind of like a little bit more of the natural life cycle, per se.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, keeping in mind, if you're stable and you take any sort of damage, you're going to get back to having to needing to make those saves. So keep that in mind. And speaking of damage while you're down, if you take any damage while you're making death saves, that's an automatic failure.
Yes, it is.
And if that attack happens to be a natural crit, that's two fail saves.
Well, start thinking about your next character at that point, I guess.
And then I find that a lot of GMs are in one or two groups when it comes to down players. Most GMs are either the nice GMs and when double tap a down creature, or a GM is in the oh you're down, I'm gonna double tap you for an extra failed save. So definitely make sure you know what type of GM you are, so you know, or what type of GM you're playing under, so you know what to expect.
Yeah, that you want to know what kind of DM that you've got at your table, so that you know which way they lean. I think my advice for most DMs, and you know, you can speak to this better than I can, though, Nakai, would be do what fits with what type of creature or monster or human is actually in the encounter. Don't just, you know, fit what's in the narrative. Don't just be like, oh, the PC went down. This, you know, wolf is going to be like, oh, the thing's not dead yet. Let me keep attacking it. No, it's probably going to start attacking the next thing that's causing it danger and ignore the PC that just went down. So my advice would be take care and consider what's going on in the situation, and don't just be the DM that just kills everybody.
Yeah, and I definitely second that. Was let's say you're fighting a big boss, and that boss is very intelligent. Depending on the type of person that boss is, they could either be like, "Oh, that guy is down right now, not dead yet, but bleeding out. I don't have to worry about this guy for a few rounds. Let me take care of this second guy that's caused me a trouble." Or you can play it as this guy's down. Let me take him out of his misery before getting to his partners over here. So definitely, I agree. Definitely figure out what works, what fits whatever situation you're trying to do, and definitely go through it. And at the same time, if you know your GM is in that camp of always going to double tap you while you're down, number one, that may not be the funnest campaign to be in, but more importantly, if you're okay with that type of campaign, make sure that you have at least one or two backup characters just in case.
Just in case. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, on the flip side of things, I think everybody should have a backup character just in case the worst happens and takes you by surprise. But in those situations, definitely have at least one or two backup characters ready.
Yeah, I think PC death is sometimes a controversial topic, right? And since we're talking about death saves, it connects really nicely with the controversial piece because if you're in death saves, you might lose your character. So having keep that always keep that in mind that you might not be able to play this character for 20 levels, right? There something might happen in the campaign, or you might run up against a DM that's running a grinder of a game, or maybe you chose to be in a grinder of a game, and this is an inevitability. So always keep that backup character, and always keep in mind what kind of game that you're in.
Right? And when we're talking about deaths and whatnot, there is some terminology called a TPK or total party kill. That's where the entire party drops and dies together in one combat or whatever it may be. Um, so usually, whenever that happens, everybody has to roll up a new character and you go from there. Unless you're the type of GM that says, all right, this situation calls for like the head cleric of the church to come over and do a total res. Honestly, I personally don't. I usually advise against that unless there's a specific situation where that perfectly fits, which may or may not be the cause. But if you're gonna do that, make sure that that kind of fits the narrative. Because if you just always revive the players, no cost to them, then that kind of says to the players that their decisions really doesn't matter as much as Daddy GM is going to be there to make sure everything is golden, or
Yeah,
Mommy GM.
always coming to the rescue. Exactly.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
definitely keep those things in mind and make sure that whatever happens sort of fits in a bit.
I totally agree. Right. This is a game, and it is supposed to be fun, but even with any other game, there's some sort of consequence, right? In D&D, it's the possibility that your character is not going to make it to the next game, right? Whereas in something like Monopoly, all you do is lose money, or you lose your hotel or whatever, right? Different. They look completely different, but in the context of a game, it's the same mechanic, just implemented a little bit differently. So,
Yep, exactly. And on that point, as a player, definitely don't feel the need to be. It's great to be attached to a character, have fun with the character and everything, but don't be so attached to a character where if that character happens to die and resurrection is off the table for whatever reason, don't be so attached where it's like, oh, just because this happened, I'm not going to play with this group ever again or whatever it may be. Just realize that this is the type of game where, like you said, death is a possibility. Dice rolls might not go your way that session. You might make a not a great decision or whatever it may be.
you might roll really low on your acrobatics check when jumping over a pool of lava and fall in. You never know, right? You never know.
Yeah. So always keep that stuff in mind, really, and just see the bright side of it. It might be fun to roll up a new character, maybe.
I think that's a really good point to kind of put a period on this. Is sometimes the creating a new character and being able to play that new character is where you can find some more fun and some enjoyment, and it you can start playing again.
Yeah.
So
And who knows, you might be able to use your character's death as inspiration for a new character. Maybe your last character somehow died at the hands of a boss or something like that, and now you're making this like oath of vengeance paladin to wreak vengeance on this guy because he killed your new character's like brother or something like that. So there's definitely a lot of stuff that you can potentially do that could really help out and fit the narrative pretty well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then the especially for GMs, there's also a few different alternative ways if you want to include some new mechanics or something like that into death instead of just standard death saving throws, which I have heard is a lot more lenient in 5e than older editions. So we can definitely take a look at a couple of different alternatives, see what they're like, and maybe see what works.
Mm. Yep.
So so one alternative that I've heard before is um, maybe you suffer some sort of mental or physical strain from that death. Like maybe when after like the second or third time or whatever it may be, you come jump back up. You're feeling very stressed from going down, so maybe you have disadvantage on your intelligence and wisdom saves for the rest of the day, or something to that knowledge or that notion, or maybe you have disadvantage on strength checks and athletics checks for the next 1d4 days, or something along those lines. So that could be a very distinct possibility where instead of just coming up fighting like normal, it's like now I gotta really strategize and have these strategies so I don't go down as often because there's consequences to going down too much.
Yeah, I think adding consequences as every time that you go down is a neat little spin on the whole death saves and the death mechanic within the game, right, within D&D. Um, you know, I'm playing in one campaign where every time you go down, that consequence gets a little bit worse, and a little bit worse, right? So if you go down 5 times in a single encounter, you might, you're gonna be paying a heavy price there, but it adds a different element, and if your players are willing to accept that, it could spice things up a little bit and make things a little bit more exciting.
Yep, exactly. Like one other alternative that I heard was maybe the first time you go down in a combat, free, you make death savings as usual, but after that, if assuming that it's in the same combat or whatnot, maybe you take a level of exhaustion or something of that nature, where it's like, okay, I could probably go down like 2 or 3 times without anything too debilitating, but after a while, those stacks are gonna really add up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And like another thing that I've also kind of heard about that I think is probably a little more common is maybe after a while of getting back up, maybe you're suffering from some sort of like mental disease or madness or something like that, where it's like, okay, now I need to go to the doctor to really get checked out, and maybe that might run me of like 100 GP or something to fix
You
that.
got to go find that doctor, that cleric,
So
or somebody. You have to go to like a church, right? You got to go get a high priest or something like that. So yeah, lot of different ways to take that.
yeah, and speaking of resources, one of the more common ways I know of is just limiting the resources for those resurrection spells. Like we all know, Revivify probably the best revival spell as it comes so early comparatively. It needs was it a
Something like
300
that.
GP
Yeah.
diamond, and I know a few people out there where it's like, yeah, you can't just walk into any city and purchase a 300 GP diamond. You might be able to go into a church and have to do a side quest, and they might give you a 300 GP diamond as a quest reward or something like that. But it's not something where you can just walk into any jeweler store and be able to buy it no problem. Or other stuff for like True Resurrection and stuff like that. They might be a little bit harder to come by, so you really got to know all right, I only have enough for like two resurrection spells over the course of the next 15 sessions, so I got to make sure I'm very careful because I have a limited supply of this stuff. And and I think another alternative that I heard was some sort of like physical injury, like maybe you have some scars that might give you disadvantage on persuasion and deception checks, or something of that nature, where it's like now I have something a little bit more permanent that I either can't get rid of that easily, or if I can get rid of, it's going to take the better part of the next like week or 2 weeks or something like that in game, that I have to physically tend to and hope that those stitches don't open up or
Yeah,
whatever
I
it
think
may
there's a lot
be.
of ways to play around with this, and I think you're throwing out a lot of really good suggestions.
Yeah. And probably the last alternative that I heard of is maybe death saves don't go away while when you pop back up. Maybe they stick around until a short rest. This is probably my least favorite of the ways that I heard, because you only get three fail
Yep.
saves before you're dead. So out of those, I would probably say that that last one is my
I
least
also
favorite that I
I
heard.
also think with that last
And
option,
then
it incentivizes the players to be constantly short resting as much as possible, which is going to break up the game a little bit and make it maybe a little bit slower than you'd want or monotonous. So I'm with you. I think that's probably my least favorite too.
yeah. And in terms of my favorites, I really like the limited supply of resources for the resurrection spells. I think that's one of my favorites. It gives you that tension of I can't go down because there's only like two revivify spells for all of us, and there's five of us in total, or something like that. And I think in addition to that, the other one that I think I really like is just the whole sort of like either physical scarring or mental strain or something like that, where you have to go to a high priest to really get that. So now the rest of your party has to lug you around. Now you got to pay 500 GP or something like that, spending your hard-earned resources. Now you might have less resources to go buy a magical weapon or whatever it may be. So I think those are probably my personal favorite
Yep. I think the
alternatives.
lesson that I learned from what you just said is hoard all diamonds that you find. Just in case, is that?
And before anybody asks, if you're the GM, don't allow the party to send their rogue in to raid each and every high church, because I know
I
some rogue
probably
out there
have.
is going to
I
try
probably
that.
have. And,
It's like I'm gonna it's like I'm gonna sneak in at 3 in the morning to steal the tithing
don't do
plates.
that.
No, don't do that. Maybe once for kicks and giggles, but don't make that a reoccurring thing. was was then the gods in D&D might not like you, and depending on your faith, the real ones might not like you. But all in all, there's definitely a lot of different things you can do with death and death saves. So definitely, I say figure out what works for
Yep.
you and do it. Oh, and one more thing that just came to mind, that I have heard from fellow D&D tuber DM layers. Sometimes maybe as a GM you roll each player's death saves behind your DM screen. Um, Basically, that kind of allows players to not know what their death saves are, so it adds a little bit of extra pressure. As I don't know if that was a fail or a save. I need to get over there to heal them. Whereas if you're actually seeing it, it's like, oh, that guy has two successes and no failures. I don't need to go over there just yet to heal him. Or it's like, he has two failed death saves. I need to heal him right now. So some is that the best way to do it? I'm not sure. Maybe, maybe not. But I I definitely find that an interesting idea to add some extra
Yeah, it
pressure
introduces an interesting
into
level of
that.
tension there in the game, which I think, depending on the situation, could be really interesting. Could be exciting. I think that's an interesting and an intriguing suggestion for sure.
Yeah, It's- it might be something that I might try out one day. You never know. But but yeah, we would definitely love to hear what thoughts y'all might have on new alternative ways and stuff like that. So definitely post on down below in the comments and see what you say. But without further ado, folks, this is another D&D Fridays.
Bye,
Keep
everybody.
y'all lives geeky.